Hi, it's Lori from Coast to Coast Craft Girls coming to you from the West Coast. Today I wanted to share some fairly simple to more complicated cards that I've made using layering stencils. I personally love stencils. I think there's a lot of things you can do with them. And this is an incredibly simple stencil. This is a slightly more complicated layering stencil. It's still relatively easy. This can be a easy layering stencil, but I've added it, made it with some texture paste, and I'll show you how to do that to just give it some dimension and texture. And I love these cards because they're very fast and easy to make, but they look beautiful. So this one was made with the Timeless Florals Rose Corner collection. It's a 3 stencil set. So you've got the first stencil is the roses, and then you've got the second stencil is the leaves, and then you've got a background stencil. And I'll show you how to make those. And this came with the Vintage Rose collection, but it was in the Crafter's Inspiration magazine. It was not part of the collection. This card was made with a 5 stencil layering stencil from the Floral Elegance collection. I love, love, love this stencil. It's really pretty, very nicely done. I'll show you how to do that. And then this one is an old Sheena Douglas 3D stencil, and it's 3 stencils, and then you have a mask that you can cover it up if you want to do the background. I didn't use the mask, but I used the 3 stencils, and I will show you how I do that with the colored texture paste. So let's get started. We're going to start with our Timeless Florals card. And we start with just a piece of cardstock. It's 4 3/4 by 6 3/4. It's a 5 by 7 layering stencil. This is cut just a little bit smaller. That's okay. And you can cut it the same size as a stencil and then tape it on. I like to cut mine just a little bit smaller. Otherwise, I end up trimming them, which is fine. And I don't use any stencil adhesive on them. I just kind of line it up where I want it. And if I have my paper smaller than my stencil, I just turn it over and tape it with some repositionable adhesive on the back. And it doesn't have to be stuck too well, but I'm going to go ahead and tape it down on all 4 corners just to kind of hold it in place a little bit. And then these are, this is the leaves. So I'm actually going to use 2 colors of green. This is Pine Tree and Grasshopper. I'm going to use Pine Tree to start with. So the open areas, I'm going to use the medium green, which is the Pine Tree. And just use a regular ink blending. You can use any kind of a tool that you want. Now I find if you just kind of softly go, and you want to move the tool so you're not rubbing into the edge of the stencil. You're rubbing from the edge of the stencil away so that you're not pushing ink up underneath the stencil. And that way you don't have to use stencil spray or adhesive. You're just going to give it a good coverage. And you don't necessarily want it to be a solid color, because in nature leaves are not a solid dark green. They're they can have mottled tones to them, and so that's makes them a little more realistic looking if they're not perfect. Okay, so there's my base layer of green for my leaves. And we're just going to turn that over and peel that cardstock off the stencil. And I'm just going to set that stencil to one side because it needs to be washed. Okay, and now we're going to take our second stencil, which is our roses, and we got to line it up. Get it in the right spot. There we go. And you can just see where it sits by the closeness to the leaves. And sometimes I've noticed that sometimes, like when you layer up this end of the stencil, so let me get that rose completely lined up. Goes right about there. This rose is actually slightly off. So what I'm going to do, well, actually, no, it looks pretty good. Never mind. Sometimes if they're a little bit off, you can kind of move them around. So I'm going to start with my pink. And the way that I did this is I started with the pink tulip, the lightest pink, with my blending brush. And just kind of gave a light coat all over. I guess in my sample I used yellow, but I'm going to use pink. You use whatever colors you want. But the easiest thing to do is to get just kind of a light coat of your lightest color on there, because you don't want it too dark. Well, I don't want it too dark. You can make it dark if you want it dark. But if you make it a lighter tone, you can actually add in some shading, which if you make it too dark, it's harder to put shading in. So that's pretty good on that. Now I'm going to put some shading in with my medium pink, which is fuchsia, but I'm not going to use the large blending brush. I'm actually going to use a little ink dauber. And you want to go from the base of the petal and just sort of flick up very lightly, or flick in the direction that you would shade. Just very, very lightly. You're just touching and kind of pulling away. And this is what will give you some shading. And some dimension, even though it's only a 2-layer stencil. And same on this side. And if you get it a little too dark, like I'm not real happy with that, as my ink on my dauber starts to wear out, I'm just going to go in and kind of blend that and pick up some of that ink for the other petals. And that'll help blend it out. I'm pretty happy with that. Now see, it's got the green veins for the leaves on the same stencil. I don't want to use my big ink dauber because I'm going to get it in the pink, and I don't want that. So again, I'm going to use one of my finger daubers, and on this one I'm just going to kind of dab as opposed to rub, because these are really fine and I don't want to risk pushing the ink up underneath the stencil. So just lightly dab straight down with maybe a little bit of a, this kind of a motion. And I want to be careful not to get it into my pink. But your little finger daubers are your best friends when it comes to stencils with small pieces. Okay, there's my leaves. I'll peel that stencil off. And it's looking really good. Now, this one comes with a background stencil. And obviously, if you put this on and stencil everywhere, you're going to cover up your roses, which I don't want to do. So what I do with the background stencil, is I just kind of position it over one piece of where I'm going to put it and decide which color I'm going to use. I think I'm going to use my Spring Meadow. And I'm just going to use a little finger dauber and just sort of softly dab, because the whole point of the background stencils is not to get complete coverage. It's just to kind of get a hint of something in the background. It's not meant to look complete. And if you do it with a finger dauber, you can avoid stenciling on top of your roses or your leaves or anything else that you've already stenciled. And then once you do that section, I'm going to move the stencil, come on down, and do this part. And because I'm not making it dark or perfect, the fact that it doesn't match up there, I don't care. Because you're just trying to get a hint of the color and the pattern in the background. And that looks pretty good. You can just see there's just a hint of that stencil in the background. It's just a little bit, just something. Okay, so that's the first layering stencil. See how fast that was? Super fast, super easy. All you have to do, trim it down, mat it, layer it. So I trimmed it down, matted it, put it on a card, added a sentiment and some gems. Done. Now we're going to go with our Floral Elegance Floral Wreath stamp, or not stamp, layering stencils. These are 5 stencils. They're numbered on the package. That's what it is. So here's stencil 1. And those are obviously the underlying flowers. And usually whenever you do layering stencils, you want to start with your lightest color and then work your way forward. Now in this one, because this stencil is larger than my paper, now what I'm going to do to help line up the other ones is I'm going to center it on my stencil, and then I'm going to lightly draw corners with a pencil. And these are light enough that I can erase them when I'm done, and they're not going to show, but it will give me a huge help in lining up the rest of the stencils. Now once they're on there, I'm going to go ahead and put that tape on 2 of the corners. You can put it on all of them, but it's not really necessary. And on this one, I'm going to start with my lightest pink, because these are the backgrounds of the flowers. So let me show you. So that's this background color in the very background. So I'm going to do that. And you could make them like, well, maybe I'll make the larger flowers pink and the little ones yellow. I'll try that. So if you want to do that, you just have to be a little bit careful about keeping your colors separated. And you could do each flower in a different color if you wanted to, but I have pink and I have yellow over here. I guess I have some lavender too, but I'm going to save that for something else. There's my lightest pink. Now I'm going to do the smaller flowers in straw bale, the light yellow. Because these are small, I'm going to use a finger dauber so I don't risk getting the yellow into the pink. There's my lightest yellow. We're going to peel that tape back. And if you peel the tape, if you just kind of rip it off, sometimes it can tear your paper. But if you peel it back and almost like roll it back on your paper, it's less likely to stick and tear your paper. And this is just stamping card. Just okay. The second stamp is stamp number 2 is this one. You can see the picture, and you got to figure out how it goes. Oh, wow, that was pretty quick. And see, those pencil lines help me line it up. Okay. All right, now, so for these, I want to use my medium pink, and that's the fuchsia. And I'm going to use my finger dauber. I'm just sort of softly going over it. I'm not pushing really hard. This would be a nice springy Easter wreath. Okay, there's my pinks. I'm going to go into the yellow with lemon tonic. So my medium yellow. that one off. Okay, and number 3 is the next one of the flowers. And unfortunately, there's 8 different ways that this could be on there. Oh, I don't even have the right stencil. Sorry. It's this one. And just keep rotating it until you figure it out. Oh, there it is. Once you figure out which direction it should go, it's pretty obvious. Okay, and then we're going to go with plum jam. Let me get my finger dauber back out. Okay, there's my plum jam. And now for the yellow. I need my honey pot. It's looking really good. Now we got foliage. Number 4 is the big foliage. And again, you got to figure out where it goes. Once you get the right spot, it's pretty obvious. Because obviously you don't want the foliage on top of the flowers. And it's so literally going to be the last one I try. Yes, it's the last one I try. And you can see that this lines up because these just mask out those flowers. And we have 2 shades of green. There's just 2 stencils of green. So I'm going to use my Spring Meadow. Because I like this color. It's nice and bright and springy. You could use your 2 darker greens if you wanted, but I like this bright green. On these stencils that have small pieces, you don't want to rub too hard in the wrong direction because you could rip them. Like right here, there's a little piece that sticks out. So be careful and rub such that it's not pulling that stencil up. And our last stencil. And to wash those stencils, you just put them in the sink with some warm soapy water and they will rinse right up. For this one, I'm going to use the medium green, the grasshopper, and go back to my finger dauber. Even with that tape on there, you can see I'm holding this down just to make sure that it doesn't move as I'm rubbing on it. I could have probably done it even without taping it down, but I usually do just to kind of help keep it in place. Okay. And that's it. Peel that tape back. And then I'm going to erase my pencil lines. And that's it. Let me show you the finished one. Actually, I like it with the two tones with the yellows in there. But all I did on this one was I trimmed it down, and then I used some pink ink and just kind of inked a little bit around the edge, matted and layered, and added a sentiment. And you're done. So super easy, fast, and it looks beautiful results. Okay, now we're going to get to the more complicated one. So this one you can do with just the 3 layers of stencils and inks, just like I've done with the other ones, but I'm going to do it a little bit differently. I've got a piece of watercolor card this time, and I'm going to put the background stencil on with my water reactive inks, just like I did with the others. I guess I should have said that. Those were all water reactive inks. And those were on, the other 2 were on just multi-purpose or stamping card, whatever they call it. This is on watercolor card. And I'm going to start with the light pink tulip. And I'm just going to put a layer of ink down. And again, I'm going to go in from the outside so that I don't pull that stencil up. I'm just going to go all the way around the edges first. This stencil is 6 by 6, and I cut my cardstock exactly the same size as this stencil, so I don't have any, because it doesn't have a little bit of much edge on it. So having it the same size as the stencil keeps it from getting stuff on the outside. Just making the center just a little bit darker, because on a flower, center is sometimes darker. Okay, so there's my base layer. Now I've got 2 more layers, and with these, I decided I wanted to try some texture paste to give it some texture. So let me get this one off. And I actually tried the first one with this one with texture paste as well, and it's too big of an area, and my card just warped, and it was terrible. So wouldn't recommend that. So now I have the second stencil, and these are actually very handy labeled, and we're going to tape that on in place, but we got to mix up some texture paste. So let me tape this in place. these out of the way. I'm going to put this right there. I'm going to go ahead and tape it down. So I don't have any varying shades of pink texture paste. Maybe you do. I only have white pearl. It's Hero Arts white pearl paste. But I'm going to make it pink. And the way I'm going to do that is with my aqua pen. So I'm just going to color, this is a piece of like plastic, kitchen plastic wrap. I'm just going to color some burgundy aqua ink on there. Then I'm going to pick up some texture paste. Yeah, that's probably about enough. And I'm just going to use, and the reason I use plastic is because so I could do that. Get it off my palette knife and just mix it up. You can use your aqua inks to color it any. Now you could use ink pads too if you don't have aqua pens. That works too, but I had my aqua pen, so. And then we're just going to spread it with the back of our palette knife gently over. Getting it in all of those little spots in the stencil. And using the back of your palette knife because it lets you spread, but also scrape off the extra. And this is why I made my cardstock exactly the same size as my stencil. Look at that, I think I guessed just about right the amount of texture paste. Now you could do this with glitter paste if you like glittery stuff. And you just want to make sure you got it in all of the little spots and that it's smooth across. That looks pretty good. Put my lid back on so my texture paste doesn't dry out. Okay, now I got to peel this stencil off and then get the stencil washed before any of this stuff dries on it. And then I have to let this sit. I'm going to let it sit overnight to dry, and then I'll do, so that's this layer, and then see I've got one more layer of texture paste. I'm going to hold it this way and maybe you can see the texture. You can see the texture on there. There's like multiple layers of the texture paste. I love the way it looks. So I'll get the tape off. And then to peel the stencil up, just kind of hold it, grab a corner, and lift and peel away. Just like that. And then we're going to leave that to dry. And I will be back with you tomorrow. And we'll do the next layer. All right. Good night. Okay, so that first layer is dry. You can see it's been overnight. And so we've got our ink layer on the back and our first layer of texture paste. Now we're going to use our third stencil and go on top, and we're going to do another layer of texture paste. And so we need to line it up. And then I'm going to go ahead and tape it down to my mat. Just tape the whole thing. And now we're going to create another mixture of the texture paste in exactly the same way that we did before. So I've got another piece of plastic wrap, and I've got my aqua pen, which is, it's the same one, it's burgundy, but I want it darker, so I'm going to put even more ink down because I want that contrast. So I need to get my texture paste even darker than before. Now if you had sparkle inks, you could use sparkle inks, or you could use your ink pads or the pots of Spectrum Noir inks. It's probably enough. We're going to mix it up the same way we did before. Just take a little bit of our white pearl texture paste, and let's get a little more. It's probably good. Make sure you keep the lids on your texture paste once you've opened them, so they don't dry out. And then just mix it all up. And you want to pick up all of that ink so it gets nice and a deeper reddish pink. So just kind of run it over the top of everywhere where you colored. And then mix it up. And you can see that it's getting a nice dark, kind of rosy pink. A deep rose, which is what I wanted. If it's not as dark as you want, you can put some more ink in, but obviously don't color in the paste because you'll ruin your pen. So color up here or on a difference somewhere else. But I think I got it pretty good. Scrape it all up. And then we're just going to kind of hold this down and spread it over just like we did before. It's a nice, smooth, even coat. Once you've got all of the spots in the stencil covered, just kind of a nice, smooth scrape over the top to get it even. And I think that's good. You can kind of pick it up and then put it back down if it's not right, but now that looks good. Okay, and you can see the varying colors in there, which is exactly what I wanted. And now we're going to wait for that to dry, so give it some time. I don't actually know about how long it takes to dry because I've just waited overnight, but this time I'm going to kind of check it back in a little bit, and so maybe at the end of this I will be able to tell you how long it takes to dry. All right, so I'll be back with you when that's dry. Okay, so it's been about 2.5 hours, and this is definitely dry. So I'm going to guess it probably was dry in an hour to 2, but it's definitely dry now. And so the one thing that about this stencil that I don't love is the inside. It's sort of a artistic view, so those inside you can't really, it doesn't really define the petals so much. So what I did to better define that middle, another layer of pink tulip so it's a little more subtle. And what I did is I just took some of the ink and I went from the inside, yeah, I like that, kind of out almost right in that middle section to better define the center and almost define a look of petals. So you can see with this one, I used the fuchsia, but I think the pink tulip I like better. And just add a little bit of darker layer into that sort of the center row of petals. Yeah, I like that a lot. And then the only other thing, I didn't do it on this one, but I think I'm going to ink around the edges. I did not do it on this one, but I think I'm going to do it on here. So let me grab my ink dauber. And we're just going to kind of go around and touch the corners. Now this particular stencil has a mask that you can put over the flower if you wanted to have a bigger piece of paper, or you wanted to do some other mixed media techniques or something around the edges of it, but I'm not going to do that. And that's all I'm going to do. And then I would just mat and layer that up. And you get a beautiful card with a lot of texture in it. I don't know if you can see that, but there's a lot of texture because of that texture paste. And I just love the looks of that. So anyway, it's my take on layering stencils. Hope you enjoyed it.